Good morning, ladies and gents. Happy Halloween. Happy Halloween weekend. Hope y'all are getting your treats and such. Hopefully not too many tricks. Hopefully just a lot of treats going on. Welcome into the Halloween edition episode of A Different View. So we've been talking a while here about this one. It's going to be a goodie. It's going to be a goodie. Because it's time to put aside a lot of the silly notions that people keep using. And holiday time is one of them, guys. Let me tell you, the holiday season is one of those where a lot of this stuff that has been built, people just start exercising their superiority complexes. Their entitlement. You see it in every store. You watch them go up and down these aisles. They treat the workers like garbage. Like, guys, there's a reason why we shouldn't look past. I'm just going to talk about this work thing for a second, because again, a lot of these things tie in with Halloween. At the end of the day, we gotta get back to a level of respect. Some of these things in Halloween, you start hearing the word pagan getting thrown around. We're gonna get into the definitions of words here, because it's necessary to talk about. Too many words and the definitions keep getting messed with, so that people can honestly just promote true dislike and hate for folks. And it's disgusting at this point, to be quite frank. And it's time that those that have a voice stand up and say something. At the very least, before anything else occurs, before life continues to go. Well, you already see it over in the Middle East, folks. I'm going to take the time here to just talk and stop to talk about the holiday season here, the onset of it, talking about, and Halloween is part of the start of it. You talk to your folks, talk to your Catholic brothers and sisters in the faith, and we're talking as far as Christians are concerned, because this is the Sunday message version. You got to understand we need to take away the partiality. I think the Bible is full of verses that deal with being partial. It's not cool anymore, guys. Before we start taking sides with the violence that's going on in the Middle East, you need to, at the very least, do a little bit of history. You need to understand, when you do a little bit of history study, you will find that this thing is not solely, it's a family fight, folks. It's a family fight. Now, you want to tell me that you want to put rules in place, these different nations of the earth. They want to put certain, of course, we call that United Nations, which, again, you got to understand here. Much of this doesn't have to do with whether or not they care about the conflict. You put that out front because you have an agenda to make sure that the money keeps getting passed around. I do apologize in saying it this way. See, it's the reason why certain parts of the world nobody's doing anything about stuff, but in the other ones they make a big to-do. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, and you have to put a certain level of gravity in the conversation when you start bringing up certain things, because, again, there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. And it's done on purpose because, again, you got to generate the machine. You use certain topics to generate the machine, i.e. Halloween. It has turned from a holy holiday, of which it is. And, again, I'm not just talking about for Christians. I'm talking about across the planet. People honoring, because that's what the holiday is about, the dead, folks. Plain and simple. It's a celebration of twofold celebration of when you go into Celtic ethnos and Gaelic ethno language and stuff like that. You start to understand that, yeah, this is about people's belief. We'll get into the topic of the word belief and religion and all that kind of thing, because, again, people's traditions and religions, clearly as the Bible says it, is making God's words not effective. It does not mean that what God is saying, what the great creator is saying, is wrong. It is the people, unfortunately. Same thing like when we talked a while back about communism and capitalism, Marxism, all these different classisms that people have come out with to be able to divide things. The ideas behind them, when you study the definitions, they in themselves are not wrong. The problem is in the people, and you see that here in Halloween. So start off with the first one here, the definition of spirituality, because again, this is about, and I'll say it this way. In the Doctor Strange 2 movie, there was a quote that came out. It was really powerful. They used it in the trailer. Of course, it was one of the main taglines in the movie as you're watching it. And it is that the multiverse is something that people know frighteningly very little about. Ladies and gents, I don't know how else to say it. When it comes to the spirit realm, people know frighteningly very little about it. So you got the Exorcist 2 movie that just came out. Of course, I didn't see it. For those who did, nothing wrong with that. See, again, this what you're going to hear on this episode here is not one of these bashing things. It's a cautionary thing. Before we start just going out blasting and bashing folks, and then we do that witch thing and how horrible they are and all this stuff, start taking note of the world around you first before you make your case. So in the case of like this, well, again, we'll touch on this just a little bit because that's not really fully what this is about. This whole Israel, and I'll do this here from time to time just because I want y'all to know I'm listening to, and I've got my own opinions and things. And again, this is just the opinion of the content creator here. Okay, if you agree, disagree, we have all given that right to choose and formulate things here. Maybe something that I say helps somebody. That's really what this is about here. Before you start formulating an opinion on what's going on in the Middle East, you have to understand that that's a battle between family there. You got to go back into the book of Genesis, start really doing a study of the times and the towns and what's going on there in the onset before you can say, hey, this one is wrong or that one is wrong. In truth, neither one of them is supposed to be fighting each other. They are half brothers. The descendants of Isaac and the descendants of Ishmael are both blessed by God. Go back into the account and read it. In Genesis, they are both blessed by God after that whole debacle with Abraham and Sarah, thinking that because she was too old to have kids after being told by God you're going to have kids, you and many people do this type of stuff. You choose the workaround. Matter of fact, life is screwed up today because people keep taking the workaround instead of just sharing this planet. They do this "I'm gonna conquer you" thing, and primarily, while most nations have had their hand in that garbage, primarily the one as of late that has thrown it off balance has been Europe. You've had some issues here in the Middle East, especially with supplanting things. We've talked about it before in Africa and dealing and involving in slavery and stuff like that. But again, the imbalances here of who's got the resources and money, it's just a constant fight. And that fight has been going on for a long time. And again, it is between the two. Who's going to support the sharing or the preservation, and who is going to do the annihilation or devastation or the taking. That is the great divide, and it's time that because we've been watching the destruction here for a while. These wars that are basically money makers. Yeah, I think you're lying to yourself if you don't say war ain't a moneymaker, and that's why you see it come up periodically every once in a while. Same thing with diseases every once in a while. Now, people attach it to Election Day, and we will get into that when we get into Election Day here. Because, again, the sham starts to show itself. And to be honest, folks, it's time to stop. We're not benefiting here. But again, we'll get into that topic here in a little bit. Okay, we will get to Election Day here in a minute. So again, spirituality definition. Before I go there and mix two episodes together here. The quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. Now, again, this idea of spirituality, people frighteningly know very little about. It's time to get some knowledge. It's time to have a base. I think the quality of life and a lot of this mess that we see would decrease drastically if people got back to a very serious spiritual base. See, and listen to what I said. I didn't say Christian. Everybody is not right. So this is respect for all beliefs. This is another part of where the problem is this disrespect. Christianity is the only way. Again, people have been given, so that thought process, but balance it with the fact that the Creator has given everybody the chance to choose. And when you do that, you back off of a lot of stuff. You take that, because now that's between them and God. See that, but that's between them and the great life force, between them and the great Creator, the great one. All the different things you see. For many times, especially for Christians, an apologetics practice is very necessary. Apologetics is dealing, now again, I may have talked about this maybe once or twice in an episode here or there, but apologizing, right? So you're presenting your case on something. That's the definition of the word apologize. Now, of course, everybody keeps thinking, oh, so I'm saying I'm sorry. No, you are presenting your case for why you're sorry. The sorry part is the byproduct of apologizing. Or the repentant part, I should say, is the byproduct of apologize. And when you make a case on something from a belief standpoint, you got to study the other religions. Beliefs, excuse me. Now, I'm going to show y'all why there's a big difference there. People believe a whole lot of different things, okay? And it's okay. It's okay. We shouldn't marginalize folks because they believe a certain thing. When you get into this thing of witchcraft here, you got to understand that witchcraft, that when you break down the word, see, again, everybody goes to the evil part of it, but we're talking about magic. We're talking about energy manipulation. Magic, when you study the word magic, it deals with energy manipulation. Now, go into the book of Acts and start showing me all the different places where energy was manipulated, because it's there. You got folks healing folks with touching handkerchiefs, walking past people with shadows. You've had Jesus using clay and earth things. And you want to talk about witches using earth and stuff like that. Well, what about the Son of God using clay, infusing it with the energy that is in him to heal someone's blinded eyes? And we can go on and 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 on. We need to pump the brakes, folks, because what it's turning into is a big old Mean Girls episode. And that's not love. So you're saying Jesus loves the little children, but then we're doing all this type of stuff to the big children, and that's what they see. This is why they don't. This is why they don't pick. If you want to say it that way, this is why they don't believe, folks. Because those who are supposed to be. This is why when we talk on this elder thing, y'all have heard me talk about some of the differentiations that people have used to divide and conquer humanity, so they can take from them the elder to the youth. See, because everybody's been talking the youth to the elder and obey your parents and all this kind of grow up, don't depart and all that kind of thing. But the knowledge and the teaching you need, adults need to come off the high horse of how bad kids are. You're not going to train them right when you're constantly looking down on them. You can't. There's no possible way you could, because you've got a blinder there that stops you. You don't think about it that way because you're going about your life and you're doing all this stuff that people are doing, way too much stuff. They're too busy to even take the time to study their kids. So how can you make a judgment on them? You ain't even took the time to really look into their life and what they're doing. Half the stuff you discredit. They talk about them being on TikTok. Nothing wrong with adults though back in the day. And see, I'm old enough here, 43 years old. I remember National Enquirer, and I remember these daytime shows, and nothing wrong with the stuff. The idea of here, what I'm trying to bring out is break down the partiality, break down the division, because it's the tool being used by the great adversary of people to hold us back, from profit, to hold us back from expression, to hold us back from a lot of stuff that increases and enriches life and society instead of destroying it. You gotta be careful. There's no other way of saying it. So when you look down to the word spirituality, right, it comes from the Latin word spiare, or there's also spiritus, means the soul, vital principle, that phrase vital principle breaks down to vitality. Vitality, the state of being strong and active, aka energy. Now see, we just finished talking about with witches, this manipulation of energy, or what they call magic. Again, in everybody, the measure of faith, and we're going to get to that here in a minute. There's in every person that energy to be used for good. And Lord, you can tell with the amount of busybodiness and gossiping and everything, people are using their energy, their magic, in a very dangerous way. So now, doing that, if witchcraft deals with the manipulation of said energy, and specifically in bad ways, this goes into the word cursing, by the way. When you see cursing in the Bible, that cursing is not talking about the bad language or words that people use they probably shouldn't use out in public in front of their 2-year-old. But at the same time, that's not the cursing that the Bible is talking about. We're talking about where you, and I think I may have mentioned it on the episode, we're talking about where you wish somebody a bad day, where you would hope a person crashes. And again, a level of honesty is really needed here. I think I ended one of the last episodes here talking about that. A level of honesty. Bible talks about dealing in affairs of life in honesty. And people are not doing that anymore, blinded by greed. That's why we don't get help on certain situations. You got to get honest with yourself to start seeing past a lot of the barriers that have been put there for your own destruction, for our own destruction. So this energy thing here, dealing spirituality. And of course, we've already said, I'm going through some notes here as I go along here, but again, the spirit realm, something we know frighteningly very little about, right? In Doctor Strange, they said it again as the multiverse is something that we know frighteningly very little about. Other realities. See, the Bible talks about in the ages to come that the great creator, the great God above, the God of gods will show us. That's another thing. Stop here for a second with that. In Exodus, in the 10 Commandments, God specifically says that this is just, take this, put it on the back burner if you want to, whatever. It's something I've seen, so I'm going to share it with folks. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Right? So we've grown up this whole time thinking, yeah, there's no other gods but God. That's an incomplete thought. The verse actually says, don't have any other gods before God. Right? So when you see Zeus and you see Ares, when you see Aphrodite and all of the other gods that you see in mythology, the idea, when you look over in Egyptian stuff, because this is where it gets, Christians get real funky with this denouncing Egypt. My apologies if you guys hear me clearing my little morning bug here. But when you look to see certain things, again, temper what you're doing here. You see these different gods in this pantheon here in Egypt. It's not the exclusion. It's the inclusion to the God of gods. And maybe this will help some folks here. Because again, I think when you're talking in Christianity, see, especially when you're looking at Jesus's ministry, Jesus dealt a lot with correcting the improper thought processes of the misuse of the Bible. At that point was the Torah, okay, and the different Jewish laws built around the Torah. Because again, there's a difference between the words that came from God and the Jewish traditions that they made from that. Two totally different things. And again, this is not anti-Semitic. We are talking about doing serious Bible study here. See, a lot of times people like to hide. It's the same thing people do with the word racism. And everybody's saying everybody's racist. At the end of the day, you got to pump the brakes on that, because now what you do is lower your case for what is truly going on wrong. Sitting there being false cops pointing out everything that is, no, that's racist. No, that's racist. This is racist. And to that point, when people say that, they are correct. The problem is there is so much that racism has done that you take away from the light of that when you keep saying everybody, somebody cut me off in the street, that was racist. You don't know that. That's not holding you back from resources and gaining wealth and such like that. There again, we're talking about a temperament here when you're using certain words and phrases. Because the world around us has been created by those manipulating and twisting the definitions of words and phrases to take from us. So you have to be careful to check your, and we'll get into that when we talk about trick-or-treating here. You got to be careful to check your behavior so that you are not becoming the damage maker here. You're being the repairer. So let's get into Halloween's definition. The definition of Halloween, according to Oxford's dictionary, is the night of October 31st, which we're going to be coming up here on Tuesday, I believe. The eve of All Saints' Day, commonly celebrated by children who dress in costume, go door to door asking for candy. Now, that's a real base, broken down, real simplistic definition of Halloween. Yeah. So, because again, this idea where part people think that it's Christian, and then people say that it's something of a religion opposite of Christian, is what they call the word pagan, which let's get into the definition of that. Because again, I got this little note here. This is the big issue with holidays, which ones are pagan and which ones are not. Okay. Because again, you had Christians come along. See, back then, right? We're going like all the way back, like close to the time right after Jesus passes. So like 20 years, 30, 40, 50 years afterwards, right? Everybody is living, still doing their thing, right? And again, when they talk about, we'll get into that in Easter a little bit. We're going to drop the nugget now. That was the death of the Savior was the collaboration of Pharisees and Sadducees, right? We're talking high-ranking people in Jewish culture who did not like a man who was speaking against them and their way of living that they had already set up. Which is funny, when you speak on Christians, it is ironic that you don't see more Christians speaking out. Now, see, they're okay with the sexuality part. They're okay with the too much drinking, the too much drugs. They're against the transgender thing, all that kind of thing. But like we're talking about like the partiality. See, like when Peter was addressed by Paul on the partiality of eating dinner in the beginning in Acts here, and again, these are all things y'all can look up. Story in Acts where Peter is having dinner with certain folks. As soon as other people came around, you couldn't find him nowhere. And Lord knows we know a whole lot of people like that. As soon as the other person has got a different thought, kind of that John and the Baptist kind of thing, you got the wild hair, you're eating locusts and honey, you know, you're a little different than people who do this sophisticated garbage that they have signed into. And again, everybody is allowed to do their deal under an open heaven. Again, in the garden, y'all have heard me reference this. In the Garden of Eden, there were many trees in the garden to eat. However, you can go too high. Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. This is a gift given to all people. The gift of faith. To each person has been given this measure of belief. You got to temper that. Nobody's better than anyone. And the Bible consistently keeps repeating it over and over again. And when you put biblical context together, that's what starts firing off certain clues that maybe there's certain things in the Bible that were messed with on purpose. Because contextually, certain things don't add up. And the words that come from the great Creator will always add up. Believe that. Again, folks have got this thing all sideways because they have messed with translations of the Bible in order to support their sickness. But I'm telling y'all today, those under the sound of my voice, the words that come from the great Creator will always add up. And when goodness is meant to be goodness, it means goodness. When there is defense against those who try to hurt you, that is a real thing. There are certain spiritual laws in place. See, people make up laws, right? They make up these pseudo stupid laws you've heard. I don't know if y'all have heard, but and we'll get into this as we go on here in February, black codes and slave codes. Maybe I'll have an episode one of them days where I just talk about it. Because, again, very people don't go to it. They don't pay attention to it. They allow it to become hidden when it's actually really out in the open, smacking folks in the face every day. There's certain things that they came up with while trying to hoard all the goods for themselves and pass it to their families and friends here. Many of whom we know today, this idea where we disassociate from, I don't know anybody. Everybody knows someone, some great great somewhere, the friends and family of someone. You know people who have been involved in this mass stealing effect. It's time we stand up, folks. That is what I submit to the thought process today. It's time we stand back against those who make fun of other people's beliefs, whether it is something based in a Christian process or not. See, I said make fun of, right? Again, you are not higher than anybody. It is by grace that you're saved, right? We're talking about what spoken to Christians here. So this kind of thing where we've become judge, jury, and executioner needs to stop, because there's only one who is. See, again, we're talking about the ministry of Jesus here. This is what not only what got him killed, because it was collusion, see, between two. And what is funny is that the same Jewish people who played pauper to Rome to gain favor for them, to get money to quote unquote protect them, they put their leader and master and savior as the collateral. And Lord knows if y'all haven't seen that, the word scapegoating, words like gaslighting, all have to deal with things just like this. Hey, we're not going to deal with the fact that we've allowed corruption inside of our belief system. We're going to attack the guy that's talking about it. Y'all have heard me say many times that when you hold down one group of people, you've set the precedent that it can be done to anybody. And sure enough, if folks collaborated to kill the Son of God, I'm sorry, man, that we're talking biblical stuff. See again, when you got Judas teaming up with Rome, and also in these verses, you see him talking to leaders in Jewish culture. Go look back in the 4 Gospels. This isn't anti-Semitic. It's the truth. Simple study shows it. Simple biblical study shows it. We got to stop that kind of stuff if we want to go further as a society. It's time to start upholding truth and justice to balance those who are upholding the opposite. So, of course, holidays, day of festivity and recreation when no work is done. It would do society a big thing to get back to an idea of rest. Folks constantly on the go, not being able to barely wash their body before they have to go back out to either something that they've already set up. This goes for folks that do way too much. And there is nothing wrong with having yourself busy, keeping this misnomer about idle hands being the devil's workshop and all. I tell you right now, there's a whole bunch of folks that are busy where their hands are still the devil's workshop. You got some folks out there, man, when they talk about the word busybody and stuff like that you hear come up in society. Words that you see in the Bible. Yeah, folks, it's a rough deal. A lot of these holidays, I got this little note here. A lot of these holidays have more to do with pent-up hate, misunderstanding, and jealousy than they do with morality or right or wrong. A couple episodes ago, we talked about the word moral, dealing with the things of right and wrong. People have exchanged what's right and wrong for what will make them money. And money, especially when you're speaking from, and this is not just Christianity, because again, Islamic teaching teaches this, Hinduistic Hinduistic belief teaches this, Buddhistic belief teaches it. They're in too many beliefs. When you're talking about physical possessions, you gotta be careful. These are the things that in the Bible specifically says they rust and corrode. For those who love this life, You lose your life. That's literally in the literal paraphrasing in John here. For those, he who loves his life will lose it. And those who hate their life will gain eternal life. Again, long-lasting life. Break down the words. Break it down a little bit. You're going to hear me do that in some episodes here where we break it down. You got to stop. You got to take a pause. Take these things in bits and pieces to put the woven tapestry, as it says in the Bible, together. Because that's really what this is. You got to use some brain power here, folks. God put the gray matter there for a reason. Combine what you believe with the good logic the good Lord gave you, and you're going to see a lot of this inconsistencies. And in seeing the inconsistencies, you're going to wind up seeing what actually should have been put in place to begin with, what was in place to begin with. So we get down to the pagan definition. So an adjective, sometimes also a noun from a historical context, holding or constituting religious beliefs other than those of the main or organized religions. That is huge. People put negative titles on something just because somebody believes a different way, different than the organized religions. Let's break down religion. Also, this is a noun or plural dealing with a particular system of faith and worship. Okay, so let's go further here. Break down the word faith. And this is where we just talked about that do not think more highly of yourself than you ought to think, because God has given each person a measure of belief. You do damage when you start thinking you're better than someone else. Everybody's got an equal footing in the game. The problem is the people who thought they had more of a footing in the game, so they threw off that balance, defying God while using scriptural verses. That's when we get into Thanksgiving, when you're talking about Puritans and folks coming over here with the settlers on the Mayflower and the blah 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 blah, and you're using the Bible to supplant and take from someone, or even deceive them through some pseudo treaty. You are invoking all kind of bad karma on you, and I don't want to be nowhere near that. We live on a made-up environment, folks, that is steeped in bad karma. And it is no wonder you see all the stuff you see all out of whack. In my best English, there ain't no way. There ain't no way the thing going good with that kind of misdeeds being done. So the faith definition: complete trust / confidence in someone or something, aka another term that's used for it is strong belief. Keep belief in mind here, because this one's going to be big. Strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion. So now the doctrines, teachings of a particular system of faith and worship. Okay. Belief. So this is where we break down all this stuff, folks. I didn't really get into the etymologies of these words, because the beliefs the definitions for the most part kind of tell the tale that I'm looking for here, that we're looking for here. Again, consistency. You're looking for consistency in thought here. Belief definition is an acceptance that a statement is true, or that something or someone exists. And that right there, folks, is where people deal. When you hear about religion, when you hear about religion and tradition, you're talking about a particular system, rules and stuff that people have set up around faith, aka strong belief that something is true or that someone exists. And when you talk about Halloween, here's where it gets fun. So the whole deal, somewhere around the late 18th century. Some of these things go back a little bit further, but for the most part around the late 18th century. So now the way they break down centuries in the Julian calendar here. And again, different cultures got different calendars for breaking down stuff, so that's something to bear in mind. But this one here that everybody goes by, 1701 to 1800. That's the 18th century. So somewhere late in there. So, you know, yeah, like 1750 beyond. You've got this word here, the etymology of it meaning hallow, holy, and hoping in. And Proto-Germanic is where the, you know, ween part, these words kind of break up a lot of things. Old English origin, you know, I've heard me break this down before. Proto-Germanic, when you hear it, think of these places in Europe. So England, Germany, the Dutch. So you got your Netherlands and all that kind of thing. Scandinavian areas, Gothic areas. Yes, I said Gothic. That's a whole thing. Again, folks like to sweep things under the rug. But you gotta bring in certain things to get a whole view here. So it's dealing with that part of the world, right? Frisian dealing with the Netherlands and northwest Germany. So a lot of these elements coming from that time period, like Halloween and again Samhain, dealing in Irish, Scottish, Celtic culture, okay, of which Galatians is part of. That was fun to find out while I was doing study on this. So now when you read the book of Galatians in the Bible, it gives you clarity. See, again, start studying the land, right, in which all the lands of these different places where they're being talked about. Start studying what's going on with the people there. It gives you clearer depth when you read these verses. So Halloween, we're going to talk about the Christian side of this thing. Because again, I'll be quite honest with y'all folks, with the conquering and everything going on in England back in the day, in the 12th century and such, when you go back further, kings and queens, everybody fighting and infighting to be taking things. You want to tell me some of it was, that's why I see, again, before you start talking about stuff going on in Israel and Palestine, just look back to other nations, man. That you want to tell me the idea of the loss of innocent life here. See, that's the problem when greed is involved, is that you're going to have innocent life here. Now, see, but again, that's all well and good to be compassionate about the Middle East. But what about North America? What about Africa, Asia, the various islands? We can't sit there on the high horse here and do this thing where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what's happening here. And then we just skip over when somebody starts mentioning stuff over here, or start giving things like, well, it's not that bad, you know, you got a couple of advancements here and there. You ought to be happy about that, shouldn't you? It is not good to be okay with crumbs when we're talking about seat at the table, which is what a lot of that conflict over there in the Middle East is about. And again, unless we're willing to have a full-on conversation, probably want to be careful in which way you go here with this. Again, to each person their own, see? To each person their own on how they choose to view. We're just presenting a different view here. So, on the eve of the Western Christian feast of All Saints' Day, it's All Saints' Day is November 1st, and then November 2nd you got All Souls' Day, all dealing with the dead who have passed on now. Remember, this is all about the dead. Now, people counteract this with, well, didn't Jesus say that or didn't God say something about let the dead bury the dead? Yes. Realize that you have to temper that with what is taught in Ecclesiastes. This is why it's total Bible study here, and the books that relate and stuff like that are important when you're doing when you're studying any religion, really. Specifically, I'm talking about Christianity. At the end of the day, if there is a time under heaven for things, then there's a time for death, folks. I mean, it's really not that hard when you think about it. We are supposed to respect those who have passed on, our ancestors. Now, again, there's also observation. You've got stories in the Bible like, Miriam talking against Moses for marrying an Ethiopian woman and her receiving leprosy as a result of her inaction. See, again, people like to look toward, oh, God struck her down with, nope. If Miriam hadn't opened her mouth in hate toward Moses, we would never had any issues. Again, life is already pre-coded with rewards and consequences for the actions that we do. So when you got a group of people coming over from another nation trying to take over somebody else's land, and it just so happens now that smallpox comes out and starts killing people as a result. Yes, I'm talking about the takeover of Europe in these lands here in North America. And the smallpox outbreak that happens killing many, that is a woven in consequence to the indiscretion of Europe. You don't blame God for that. You blame your, I say this, you blame your ancestors for that, if you have some, or if you know people who do. Those around you of certain descent. It's about holding each other accountable, folks. If we know these behaviors are no good, if you know when you look at certain black codes that it's only okay to have a certain amount of people in an environment or an organization or in a gathering, and you know it is done in a way to keep people separated and not to have too much of a voice, then what would the opposite be if you were going to stand up against it? You would want to be encouraging multiple peoples of all cultures, and specifically the cultures who have been alienated, to have a lot of people there. That's the way this works. That's the way this works. Christians were not thrown in gladiators arenas for no reasons, folks. It's not just a belief in God. It's not just, like, X-Men cartoons, somebody, the Sentinels are going looking for the mutants, and, they got their little, police, mutant DNA detectors going around, mutant. That's not what was. No, it was the part where you follow as Christ did, and you speak out against wrong. And when you do that, you put a target on your back. But see, again, people, like I said at the outset of this, you have to come to conclusions on certain things. What do you truly believe? Again, for those who love this life, they will lose it. And those who hate this life will gain something much better. That's the sobering thought, folks. You see people around you getting abused and misused. It's what threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, but they got out of it. It's what threw Daniel in the lion's den, but he got out of it. It's what put Jesus on the cross, but Jesus got out of it. See, again, we're talking about belief here. What do you believe? That's the power behind Halloween. Honoring the dead. Our grandparents and great-grandparents, people who actually did put very serious life-necessary essence into us, that left us either too soon or lived out their race. Their race, meaning their journey. Race, as it's said in the Bible. You completed your task, and they went on, and they left behind to us very serious and powerful essence to continue living this life and to be able to deal with the turmoil that is in it, unfortunately. Like I said, the thing is not going around problems. It's the ability to work together and go through the problems. That's where the key is. So, getting back to this whole thing, it was a time in the liturgical calendar year. So now a lot of people don't pay attention to liturgical calendar year. Most people don't pay attention to calendar year. Couple of different seasons and celebrations in liturgical calendar year. So they'll call it All Hallows Tide. There's also Christmas Tide. You've got one during Easter. and a few others in the middle that normally those of orthodox beliefs, certain denominations are going to follow. It's not a thing that everybody does, which again, it goes in line with the idea that many trees in the Garden of Eden were given for us to eat from. And instead of making divisions over these things, which has happened with denominations, you can look at the definition of that word and tell you right now it's okay that certain of those who follow after Christ have made churches based off of and religions and such based off of divisions, denominations, based off said beliefs. But guys, we're talking about, like I just mentioned a little while ago, a woven tapestry. We're a group here. And it's dangerous to go around being a divided group. Yeah, there's got to be a level of solidarity somewhere. So you're not telling me as a Baptist I can't talk to Catholic people, Protestants can't talk to Catholic people. Hey, newsflash, one of the things that happened back in history here, if the Catholic Church was out of line and certain those who were Catholic said, hey, this is not cool, and part of them was Martin Luther, even though Martin Luther had very serious racial issues and anti-Semitic issues, and ain't nothing wrong with the Jews. And again, people have been attacking the Jews since Egypt, enslaved them. That's a problem. See, and again, all people, of course, Jewish people, God's people, okay, but we're talking about earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So that would be like all people, not cool to be attacking folks, okay? And that the idea is to be protecting folks. Defense for yourself is one thing. Attacking folks, that's a whole other monster there. So again, to celebrate and remember the dead, saints, aka hallows, that's where you get the hallow part there. Again, we're talking about holy things, martyrs, and those faithfully departed, like church workers, and we all know these kinds of people, neighborhood helpers, people who made a difference in society. This is that time to remember them. That's why when you talk about the Day of the Dead, which not just Mexico, folks, the Day of the Dead is recognized in like the islands in Australia, Philippines, certain parts of the Middle East. It's all over the place. So some of these holidays influences, because this is another part where this gets fun. So again, we mentioned Celtic, Irish, Scottish origin here. It's a harvest festival. Again, you're talking about getting the harvest in before the freeze. And those of us, depending on where we live this time of year, it's getting real cold. If you're up in the north, it's probably already cold. Might be getting some snow. On the northeast, it gets a little wonky. Maybe down south, it's still a little warm. Hadn't hit just yet. But no worries, because it's coming. Again, November, Samhain, in Gaelic and in this Irish Scottish culture, they actually use that word for November because it deals with the dead season. See, again, we're talking about the dead, the honoring part of death, which again, people have very little. There's nothing wrong with it. When you talk about letting the dead bury the dead, this is when you're gone too far. But the celebration of death is two totally different things. So we're giving thanks for the holiday season, and then we get into into this word here, Samhain. If you did, in this here, is because we're talking about recognition. Can't just scoot this off because, the Celtics over there and they're pagans and blah, blah, blah. No, again, see, they just have a belief different than yours. Okay? Not making them evil. Maybe you can learn something. Which again is why you see, though they were honoring the dead, now all of a sudden Christians are honoring the dead. There's something that you can pull from everybody, folks. Okay? They do their thing. They pray this way. I pray this way. Okay? The idea here, though, kill them over there. Got to be careful with that kind of thing, man. You got to be careful with that type of thing. If you don't truly study other beliefs and cultures, number one, how can you comment negatively on them? If you have no idea about Middle Eastern culture, how can you actually make a full opinion? You can't. You can't. If you're looking at it only one way, how can you make a full opinion on something? You can't. You can't. And this gets into other topics in different areas of life here. There's no way you can make certain distinctions without having the whole. You gotta have both sides. You gotta have all the views. Because again, you're gonna have incomplete thought. You gotta also be willing to get more information. And Lord knowing they control a lot of information getting out. But at the same time, there is also a lot of information out there for people to learn. So that's number one. And number two, to see, like I was just finished saying, to see the whole view on something. You can't see the whole view on something when you will only recognize a couple parts here. You gotta look at and there's nothing wrong with it. Again, to support what I believe, there's nothing wrong with me looking at what goes on in Islamic belief, or Hinduistic belief, or Buddhism, the teachings of Confucius. Again, if I believe so strongly in something, then I'm going to study to see what I'm learning here, what I believe. Too long people have taught that thing the opposite way, and they've done a lot of damage, because again, now you separate yourself, see, and that's an issue when you start doing all that dividing, because again, this is about divide and conquer here, and the idea would be make yourself stronger. So little pause here, because I was still in this thing. When speaking about Celtics, understand that there's a long history of infighting in Europe at this time here, when you got Samhain and all that kind of thing going on. Again, this goes back into the 12th century, although the word Halloween here comes out in the 18th century. See, again, we've said this before here. When things you see come out, it's already been happening for a while. It didn't like, boom, here's the day. Like something had been going on behind the scenes in life. And then they said, hey, here's this day. So much of it being the same things that we see today. And again, you'll see whatever comes out today would have already been in the works a little while before. So before we saw the war on drugs in the 80s, there had already been plans for it generations before. I laugh through that, because sometimes it's easier to laugh through these things and get upset about it. So the humor helps me get through it. But there's very serious gravity to this, folks. This is why we must always be vigilant. That's where the term in the Bible you hear hold fast comes from. You got to be again, the way black folks say it is stay woke. You have to have your mind renewed to what is going on around you. Multiple time periods here. I'm not really going to get into a lot of that, but understand there's a lot of wars going on in Europe and in England for control of England. You'll get your Anglo. Now we've heard Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-Normans. You've had people here trying to do the takeover thing, and it spilled over from Europe into the Americas. Over time through the Middle Ages, which again, in the Middle Ages, when you talk about the medieval times, Middle Ages, you've got an early, high, or middle period and late period. When you get into the late period, you start to get into closer to the Renaissance era and stuff like that, because now you're getting closer to 1500s, and Lord knows we all know what happened in the 1500s when Europe got involved with Africa. So again, this is a big old hate fest going on. This got nothing to do with, and they use religion to support they use belief to support their hate. They turn belief into religion technically, and they start using that to hurt. And that's not the name of the game here. That's some real bad mojo you don't want to mess with, to be honest. It's the reason why you start seeing wild things happen to people when they keep screwing around with folks. You do not want to invoke, I don't know how else to say it. See, again, give and it shall be given unto you. The antithesis of that would be taken, it'll be taken from you. These are spiritual laws already in the planet, like the stuff the Creator put here because God knew folks would go wild and try to hurt each other. So protection is the big thing here. Don't blame God because you decided to talk against your neighbor brother, sister. So we're talking about family. It doesn't matter what it is. Like if you pulling a Cain and Abel, we'll say it that way, right? You trying to assassinate character and all that kind of thing because you have a jealousy issue. Again, people need help, folks. It's supposed to be up to you. You want to talk about the Bible talking about that a light on the hill shouldn't be hidden and it's supposed to shine to show the glory of God, right? My light, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Like so we got that whole kind of thing going on. That light is supposed to be, hey, we're not doing it this way. This is great that you got generations of folks who are good at undercutting people, but we're not doing it that way. And you got to be ready for the penalty that's coming. It's much easier to lock arms together and go through it than it is to just throw folks to the wolves. It's a real thing. Until we start getting that kind of mentality, this is why you see what you see in society. Survival is the name of the game here, folks. And we have to get real committed to understanding that you either do it through annihilation or you're doing it through preservation. But you know, the gray area there. See, again, we talked about absolutes a while back. You know, this is one of those where that's really about it when it comes to survival. You know, and it can be done. And we have seen what it looks like when annihilation's at work and destruction's at work. Again, this conquer and divide when conquering's at work. It's dangerous, folks. It's dangerous. You know, and a lot of that spillover in England. You had a whole lot of stuff going on in Ireland as a result, and people holding on to beliefs, and again, one of these being representing, not representing, but the respect for the dead. You know, you had the Reformation around this same time here, this Dark Ages period, or not Dark Ages, the late Middle Ages period. Where you start seeing a lot of changes start to happen here. And the Reformation, of course, Roman, again, Catholics, having some certain views here that, you know, needed to be dealt with. And, of course, one of them here, you're talking about in belief, where the idea of solely faith in God alone as compared to your works. When in reality you believe a thing and then your actions respond, and you see a whole lot today where people's actions are they say they're Christians, and the Bible does a lot of talking about this. You say that you love God, but if you're putting down your brother, sister, you're putting down people here, unprovoked attacks and such, and again, what they call defamation of character and all those types of words that we've come up with legal sense. You're doing that stuff and you're a Christian. Far be it from us, folks. You know, and the same thing goes for all the other different beliefs in the world here. Doesn't matter. You know, that's what's so horrible about the partition in India, is that they started, again, England was involved in this in the 40s, okay? In the 1940s, during World War II, having battles between those who were Sikhs and those who were Hindu, and the different beliefs that were going on in India at the time to cause division so they could step on in and start taking land and stuff. So you got people fighting over things that you shouldn't, and when you're all dead, guess what happens? They come and take your stuff. Guys, we can't, it should have never been, and it is no longer a thing where we should feed into that type of mentality anymore. It is toxic. It is not healthy. It destroys and robs no matter where you go. And specifically when you're talking about the Bible, you know that the great adversary of the brethren, the scripture tells us that the enemy comes to rob, steal, kill, and destroy. But that God has come, Jesus has come to give life and life more abundantly. So wherever you see a whole bunch of robbing, killing, stealing, and destruction, you know evil's afoot. And wherever you see life being given back, That's where you know good is afoot. That's where you know these spiritual forces are at work. This is a real thing. It's a real thing. It's why certain things we should not mock, man. There are certain elements God has put in his planet to as wards of protection. That's a real thing. Again, when everybody makes fun of, matter of fact, we'll just go into it a little bit. So trick or treating comes from this idea of in other cultures. Again, talking Celtic, you deal with guising from a Christian perspective. You've got souling. Basically, people get you kids dress up, reciting rhymes, going door to door, asking for candy. And now check this out. In some places, they gave them money. Matter of fact, they actually targeted the rich neighborhoods. Now, pause. See, again, we're doing this pausing thing. What if we had more of an idea there where we started as community? See, when they talk about when Jesus talks about the poor you will have with you always, that's just not talking about like, oh Lord, we need to walk on the other side of the street, kind of like what they did with the Good Samaritan. There, you got the man bleeding, dying in the street, and the Levites kind of walked on the other side of the road. Yeah, that's not what we're looking for here. When you got the ability to help, that's not the time to go. Oh, I got an important meeting to go to. I gotta go. That mentality is not going to help. We need to come away from that and start really getting involved in people's lives here. The superficial has never, did never, and will never help in these regards. It's time to strip down, to stop worrying about what money you'll lose, what job you'll lose, who won't roll with you. If people really care about you, they're going to care about you one way or the other. And the ones that only hang around, there's an old school term called good time Charlies. I guess if you wanted to make it, because again, a lot of sexism going on. If you wanted to make it more of a complete thought, you also got yourself good time Sallies or whatever name you want to put in there. Folks that are all right for the party and the get down, but when it's time for rolls the sleeves up, they're the other opposite way. And again, in the story of the Good Samaritan, you're gonna have to get your hands bloody. You're gonna have to get your hands dirty to do this thing. It's not working by magic. There's no Harry Potter spells here going on. The magic is in us. The energy is in us. That essence lives in us, and we are the ones that put the roll up the sleeves and let that thing get to work. And it starts with the defense of people who are upholding right and justice and truth. Again, when the Bible talks about the narrow road here and the broad road, that's what a lot of this got something to do with. Everybody ain't going down the same road of this kind of thing here. But you know that you're upholding right and truth. And at the end of the day, this is who we answer to, the great creator, folks. I tell you this for me. I am not standing before the pearly gates and having to answer to my creator as to why I help somebody get cast down and hurt in life because of my inaction or because of my help in trying to hurt someone. I'm not having that conversation. Maybe other people have resolved themselves that it's okay for the temporary pleasures of life. But again, when you're talking about belief here like this, not cool. Honoring the dead, not cool. Not cool. So, some things like apples and nuts, as much as all the candy thing is really cool, what if we switched up the game now again, right? So you can hear the moaning and groaning from the crowd, even as I mention it. But again, we're talking about health here. We understand the damage that all introducing all these sweets, because Lord knows we don't wait for just Halloween and holidays to eat sweets. We're pumping our system full of it. This gets into health a little bit. But apples and nuts works just the same. And the dentist will thank you for it. There'll be one less tooth you got to drill into. And now this here is this a big one, right? So the youth over in Scotland, they dress up, do their thing, but they'd also threaten mischief. This is where the trick part comes in on the treat a little bit. And of course, there's some other things that go into the trick and treat part, but this idea here where you threaten mischief. There is enough detractors people are going to give us. Now, you've heard me talk about removing the excuses. If you want better in life, you got to remove the excuses that everybody says to get away from the status quo to make a better life, right? So one of these is how the youth are always, Lord knows the adults cause more mischief than the youth. We just slide on past that. Again, most of the wars, most of the gossip, most of the cutting down of people and all this kind of stuff. You got Jane talking to Janet about how weird Susan looks. All that kind of. So the mischief, when you talk about mischief, Lord knows adults got their hands in it way more than kids do. However, when you're talking about young people and the detractor that they're already going to use to say how bad you are anyway, and this includes your parents, okay? This is a shout out to the kids here, listening and enjoying Halloween, and as you should. Eat, drink, and be merry is a real thing. But at the end of the day, realize that while you're partying, have a level of gravity with what you're doing. Again, it's getting back to responsibility with the abilities you've been given. Just because you want to team up with your friends and these folks, they live their lives wild and free, you got to understand, you got to have a knowledge of self. And understand that what they do, while you might be cool with them on one level, don't be cool on that other area. See, and this is the part where strong community comes into play, because a stronger community, while these things come up, there'll be much less. There'll be much less, and people be able to enjoy a serious level of health here. So just watch out for that kind of stuff in these holiday seasons. Souling, that's guising, where you get dressed up and you have all that fun there with that. Again, we're talking about trick-or-treating now. Souling, over on the Christian side of it, again, during All Hallowtide, again, dealing with, starting during the medieval era, so we were just talking about all the different eras inside the medieval era, where you're dealing with Remember the Dead, okay? A very simple form of this, Jesus saying, do this in remembrance of me, where they would go, sing songs, all this kinds of things. You'd carry lanterns, you'd light bonfires, you'd do plays, all in this idea of honoring those who have passed. They would go and even visit local farms and cottages. Again, this idea of going to houses. They'd make soul cakes. I don't know for how many people on the episode here know what that is, but again, you're making a cake, something to commemorate and honor the dead. Now, again, you can get in the native culture, you can get in the African culture. You got so many different here where this connecting thought of honoring those who have passed is a real serious thing, folks. With the bonfire thing I mentioned, they did that to ward off evil spirits. Say what you want to. Again, if we're painting door mantles in Exodus with the blood of lambs to ward off evil coming, I think we probably should be able to give a pass to a bonfire. I'm just saying. Again, cut out some of the silly, petty divisions that we keep doing. You had apple bobbing. Apple bobbing's pretty cool. Everybody likes bobbing for apples, right? And you hold your breath underwater and trying to grab on an apple and all that kind of thing. Did you know that whole thing deals with the symbolism of taking life from death? Back in the day, they also used to hang the apples off of swinging like ropes and such, and you had to go, hopping up in the air with your hands behind your back, or reaching for the apple to snatch it off the rope. Again, everything with symbolism. The turnip, because again, they just didn't only use pumpkins. The turnip and pumpkin carving thing, where you get the jack-o'-lantern from. You got images with a candle inside representing a soul trapped in purgatory, or also those same pumpkins used with the lamps there, used to ward off evil spirits or the undead. Now, again, if you got people rising from the dead during the rapture, I think maybe that's something to look into. You want to say that you ain't got zombies walking around now, and again, all we're seeing through movies and cinema and everything, TV and stuff. Okay, but again, these things really mean something. Got to be careful about how far we go. And again, we get into divination and stuff, dealing with looking into the future by certain spiritual, supernatural means, and however you do it and all that kind of thing. Again, so everybody keys in on the bad part, because it's easy to do that. You see, it's very easy to do that, but it's harder to look the opposite way on things. It's harder to build a case the other way around. And that's where a lot of the power of this is, folks. It's a party representing and honoring the dead. Another part with the Festival of the Dead, or Dia de Muerte, as is said in Spanish, is dealing with a feast also of ancestors. That's another way that it's said, where altars are made in Mexico, specifically during this Day of the Dead, where altars are made by the kids in the towns for those dead children that have passed. All the way down to the kids. We're talking about knit community here. We're talking about a community mindset, which people have cast aside here for money, which and possessions and things which are temporary. Very, very silly. There's more important things at work here. So, I mean, that's just some of the stuff on my mind here with Halloween. Again, folks, stay safe out there. Let's not try to do anything too silly, but definitely enjoy, have fun. Put the boo birds and the haters aside here, and understand why we're doing this. Honor those that have passed, and move on to a better life. Let's protect each other and go forward. So that's what I got for today, folks. And as always, look to find the beauty in a different view.